Alright, so we're going to get started on restoring these garage doors in Edina. We just pulled up, we kind of unloaded our equipment here. We instructed the homeowner to pull their cars out of the garage. We just want to do that just in case, because we're going to put gel stripper on here, let it sit all day, and then we're going to pressure wash it off. And we want to make sure that when we pressure wash, if there's any cracks or anything and it pushes through, it doesn't land on the car. So they have to make sure that they pull their cars out of the garage during the stripping day. The other thing you want to make sure you get is the garage code. They set a temporary garage code for us, which is great. However, whatever way is comfortable for them, maybe they know that they're going to be home the entire process, that's okay too, but we want to make sure that we can lift the garage doors up and down as we're working. You see the finish on these garage doors right now, what we're kind of looking at. It's beyond the point of like a maintenance code or anything like that. It's been probably 6-7 years too long. So we're going to get a gel stripper applied. There's two different ways that we can apply the gel stripper. We can either put it on with a sprayer, which is what we're going to do today, or we can just put it on with a brush. It kind of makes a difference as far as how hot it is and if the sun's shining directly on it. If that's the case, it makes a brush application a lot more difficult because it'll start to dry. You need that gel stripper to stay wet for at least 5 or 6 hours for it to work through all of the previous coats. If it dries up, then the old coating will kind of harden again and it'll stop. So the stripper will stop working. When you put it on with a sprayer and you get it on real quick, it makes it a little bit obviously faster to apply it, but also you can cover it with plastic right away, so you have less of a chance of it drying out, and you can also put it on thicker. So the first thing that we're going to do is get the outside edge masked off. We are going to paint this trim, but we're going to just get it masked off anyways, because usually we're not painting, we're just taking care of the garage door. So we'll mask it off. We'll put some 24-inch plastic on the bottom here. We don't really have to worry about this type of cement, but standard practice is just put a 24-inch piece of plastic down at the bottom, so any stripper that sags and runs off the garage door, it catches. And then we can take that up when we start pressure washing. But we'll get started on masking right now. Tack it up so it doesn't move around too much. Okay, so now we're just going to get our 24-inch plastic put down here. Just clean it up quick with a rag or a broom. And this is really just to catch the stripper. Once we come back to pressure wash, we're actually going to want to take this up and just get it wetted down, and then start pressure washing our stripper off. Alright, so now we're about ready to spray the stripper on. We want to get plastic ready to go so we can get it covered right away. We got the sun that's beating on the garage door now, so even though we're spraying, it'll probably dry out pretty quick. So we got the plastic drawn out here that's as big as the garage door. We'll cut it, and then I'm going to run a strip of tape across the top, tack it up there, and we'll kind of just pin it with a couple pieces of tape so that we can just drop the plastic down as soon as we get to the spraying. So. Okay, so we rolled it up and tacked it at the top there. If you were brushing this, you'd probably want to tack it along this edge because you're going to be moving a lot slower. You're going to be doing a panel at a time. So you're going to take the plastic off and put it on here immediately after you get done with like one panel. And then you're going to do another one, put the plastic over the top of it right away because it's going to move a lot slower. and then you're gonna have to tack it a couple places up top, otherwise the plastic will fall down. So a little bit different process if you're brushing the stripper on versus if you're spraying. This is set up for spray. So now we're gonna get the gel stripper loaded up with the sprayer. We actually already loaded up because we had to clean the sprayer out at the shop, so it's loaded with stripper, and we just had to do a couple tests. So you can see the consistency of the stripper. It's pretty thick. It's kind of like peel bond. And we set it at about 1100 psi, and that seems to work pretty good for this. We take all the filters out of the guns. No filters at all. There's no rock catcher, none of that stuff is installed. So, and this sprayer that we have is pretty much just dedicated now towards spraying a gel stripper for garage doors or lock homes or whatever. So. So it's important to get a second coat applied over the top of that first coat, especially on a double car garage door. The sun's beating down on it. It's starting to dry up on me already. So you really want to get a lot of material out of that stripper applied. So that second coat is really important. So you bring that plastic down, and then you want to kind of take a bunch of extra room at the bottom and get it pressed onto that bottom edge of the garage door. And leave yourself enough room so that when you press it up to the top, it doesn't pull on that top edge of the tape. So just get it all pressed down and you should be good to go. Okay, so it's been about 4 hours, maybe 5 hours. The longer the better. You can get this stuff applied and then wait for it to kind of work its magic and come back later in the day, the better, especially if it's cooler out. You know, if you're 50s, 60s, it's going to take longer than it is when it's 90 degrees to kind of work. So, but it's been about, like I said, 4 hours or so, and I can tell if I do a scratch test on the surface here, I can tell it's releasing, it's going down the bare wood pretty easily. It's not going to release everywhere, but the objective with stripping is kind of get us about 75% of the way there, so it makes it easier when we start sanding. And we want to concentrate on the grooves, the areas that are harder to reach to sand. If it was just all a flat area, we'd probably just use our fest tool and sand it all off. And since we have a lot of grooves and detail areas to clean up before we stain it, we want to use the stripper. So I'm going to use a white tip here. I'm not trying to get everything off. I'm really just trying to get that top layer off. You get too aggressive, too close to the wood, you're going to damage it and you're going to end up having to do a lot more work sanding. Mitch is going at these beveled edges at about a 45-degree angle. So on each panel, he's going over it twice. We really want to make sure that we get it stripped out of those beveled edges because it's going to make sanding a lot easier. After a quick rinse of the garage door, getting rid of some of the wood pulp and debris, Mitch is going to apply the wood conditioner and then let that sit for about 5 minutes and then get everything rinsed off. So we really can't emphasize the rinsing enough. Once those wood fibers dry out and they stick to customer's house, it's really hard to get those off. So make sure you do a really, really good job of rinsing the trim, the garage door, and the cement. Part of that rinsing process includes opening the garage door and rinsing part of the interior of the garage out. you're going to have a lot of wood pulp that is going to collect. You want to kind of navigate all of that or guide it into the yard, pick it up as best you can, and then as that dries out and you come back out to sand it, pick it up again. You're going to want to let the customer know that you're aware of it and that you will pick it up and clean it when you come back out to sand. So this is kind of what that garage door looks like after it's been stripped. You can see there's quite a bit of spots still left, and that's okay. We're focused on getting it out of that beveled edge and making sanding a little bit easier for us. Now this is what it looks like after we came back and we started sanding. So you can see that it probably did remove about 85% of the old material. This concludes part 1 of the garage door restoration process, stripping the garage door. Now we'll get into what we have to do for sanding a garage door. Okay, so now we're on to the sanding day. Just let it dry overnight, it should be fine. What we're gonna do is hit it with 80 grit and then 120 grit. If you do have to go lower, say 60 grit, you'd wanna go 60, 80, 120. We're gonna be using 2 different sanders. We're gonna use the RO 150, which is the 6-inch festival sander. It's this one right here. It's going to work through the bulk of the material, with flat areas, make it go faster. And then we have the RO 90. That's going to do the corners. This garage door has beveled edges, so we're going to use this sander to get inside that beveled edge. And then this garage door also has the windows here with the sashes, so we're going to use the sander for the sashes. When we sand, we always stay with the grain of the wood. We're not going to go against the grain, so you're not going to see me sanding like this. I'm going to go with the grain of the wood. And then when I'm sanding up on the sashes and around the windows, I'm going to be extra careful, and I might even turn the speed down on the sander down a little bit, just to make sure I'm not getting it to run up on the glass, because this will scratch the glass. So we'll go through and hit everything. This garage door, we don't need 60 grit on it. We're just going to hit everything with 80 grit, and then we're going to come back and finish it with 120 grit. We don't ever want to go above 120 because it's going to laminate the wood. It's going to close down the pores, and it means that not enough stain is going to soak in, which means that you're not going to get as much protection, and it's also it's not going to build the sheen and everything and the color as we would expect with a 120 grit. The 80 grit, usually you can kind of see some swirl marks from the sandpaper. That's the reason why you have to go 80 to 120 to get rid of the swirl marks, and then swirl marks should be gone, and we know the sand's going to soak in. So I'll just kind of demonstrate how I'm going to do this. If you're working with 2 people, that's the ideal scenario. You have one person kind of working ahead with the big sander, and then one person coming behind with the details. So this person will come through here and hit all these beveled edges, hit all the corners, hit the sashes, kind of behind that person that's hitting the majority of the sanding. So I'll start with the 150 here. Okay, so this garage door is a solid wood garage door. Some of the garage doors that we've restored in the past is actually a veneer panel, so you can sand too far and get through that kind of natural wood veneer on the outside and get through to what is more like a plywood surface if you get too aggressive with sanding. So if you're sanding a garage door that's a veneered panel garage door, you just have to be extra careful not to get too aggressive. You know, don't tip the edge of the sander one way or the other too much. You want to kind of keep it flat, because if you tip it, especially with the 150 80 grit on there, it works through material pretty quick, and then you're going to start exposing plywood, and we're going to have trouble after that. So I got this panel sanded with the 150 80 grit. Now I'm going to hit it with 80 grit and the Delta sander with the RO 90. I'll hit these grooves here first, and I'll kind of hit all the details. This person's kind of the person that's in charge of making sure everything is nice and consistent, and anything that was missed with the 150 you hit with this. So I'll get started. will say that when I'm doing this Delta sander, I'm trying to keep my pressure into the corner and not wrapped around this edge, because I don't want to deform these edges. I don't want to change the shape of them. So, and I'm not putting very much pressure on it. I'm really just letting the sander do the work and the sandpaper do the work. More passes is better than a lot of pressure and only 1 or 2 passes. If you have some stain that's stubborn to get out. Something else you want to look out for when you're sanding with this Delta sander is to check between changes in level in the wood. See, there's 2 different panels there, and if there's a change in level, that 6-inch sander might kind of skim over it and not actually sand down into the surface. So you'll want to check to make sure that that 6-inch sander did sand it. If not, hit it with this Delta, even if it's a flat area. So you're going to want to check everything with this Delta sander. You're kind of the person that makes sure that everything is good before we start staining. As I was sanding the sashes, I realized that these were just put on with double-sided sticky tape. It's kind of strange that it was done that way, but since it is, we're going to actually take off we already took off all the sashes, and we're going to sand these independently. So these are just put together like this, where these pop out. So I switched the attachment on the RO90 from the Delta to the round, put 80 grit on here, and instead of trying to sand those, which this isn't the case every time, a lot of times these will be fixed in there and we'll actually have to sand these when they're fixed. But since we did take these off, it's going to be a lot easier to do it with these removed. So I'll just take each one of these, and I'm in the orbital mode. As I finish these, I'm going to put these back together to make sure that we know which one was which for each window. And when I'm sanding these, I'm being real careful, and also when we remove these, real careful, because this is obviously a weak joint. We break one of these sashes, it's really going to hold this job up to try to find a repair for it. So here's a photo in the middle of our sanding operation, showing what it looked like before and what it looked like after, and sort of what our expectations are. So after the garage doors are all sanded down, again the 80 grit and then 120 grit to finish, we're going to take a leaf blower and blow everything off. You'll see that we also remasked the outside edge and the bottom to cover the cement with a 24-inch plastic. And after everything's blown off, we'll go ahead and start staining. So this concludes part 2, which is the sanding process. We'll get into part 3 next, which is the stain application. So you don't have to spray this finish. You can do a brush only finish. It's a little bit more difficult because you're going inside of a bucket, putting it on, and it's going heavy initially versus a spray. No matter what, we hit this with a brush. We're going to back brush it even if we spray it. But when we spray it, we get a nice consistent coating and we just back brush it. Versus here, you have a big blob. You try to work into the surface. So it takes a little bit more brush work and a little bit more detailed eye to know what looks good and a nice consistent finish. More or less what you're trying to do is get it on there, on the surface, completely filled in, and then you come back through it and you tip it off just lightly. Kind of look at it, make sure it looks like an even coating and it's not thick in certain areas, and then you kind of move on to your next area. And you're going to be doing from the natural end point from one board to the next where it's cut off here. And I'm going to work on this piece and then this piece and then these inside pieces. And then we're going to be brushing this up here and then spraying this down below. So we'll cover this with a shield right here to protect the glass, and then we'll spray everything down below later. So I don't want to come back down here as I'm brushing this, because then it's going to get 2 coats. It's going to look a little uneven. So I'm going to try to cut this in as neatly as I can as I'm doing the application, so we get a nice even coat. And up top here, you want to make sure that you get a brush up underneath that seal. And with this finish, whether you're spraying it and back brushing or brushing it only, you can't just apply it and then leave it. You have to babysit it for a little bit to make sure there's no sags or it hasn't kind of pooled and collected in corners and it's started to drip. So before you walk away from it, you're going to want to kind of take a look at it for about 15-20 minutes and make sure it's good. So I can see a couple areas where my brush hit the side of the panel as I was brushing this this inset piece. So I'm going to come back around and check it again. Just brush it in a little bit more. Should be good. I'm going to take a rag that's got a little bit of thinner on it and I'm going to clean this glass up. There's a little bit of residue or a little bit of film that's left on there from the gel stripper that we had applied. So we're going to clean it this with a little bit of thinner. We're also going to clean it with some window cleaner. So we have part of our video cut out on us during the spray application. But what we did was we held a cardboard shield at the point in which we stopped with the brush and used that as a guard, and then we sprayed it on with a 517 tip. We are using a Titan 440. The pressure is set very low down into the stain dial area. My guess is it's probably around 1,000 psi. And we're using the cardboard shield just to guard the glass to make sure we don't get any oil overspray on that glass. And then we back brush everything. So probably takes about 30 minutes total to do the application, kind of babysit it for a while. The second coat application is no different. We do have footage of that later, so we'll show that in a little bit. Okay, so we're out here on our third day now, doing our final coat of stain. We first started off with cleaning out all the windows up top, just with window cleaner. And then we brushed the top section again. Now with that top section, you could go one of two ways. You could either mask it off with tape and plastic and then spray it, or we just chose to brush the top half and then we used the shield from here down to spray it. So you can see right now the difference between one coat and then the second coat over there. It changes quite a bit. So that's one of the things you have to talk to a customer about after the first day, because some people are a little bit worried, like, oh, is this what it's going to look like? No, it's not. You know, it gets a lot deeper, a lot richer after that second coat. And then we can even apply another coat. So it's a good idea after we get done with this coat, before we take off all our masking, to check with them and make sure that this is good enough. Because we can apply a third coat, all the prep work's already done. It doesn't take a lot of time for us to come out here and spray it again. And that'll just darken the color even another shade. So it's good to check with them after you get done with this. You can see that Mitch follows right behind me with the back brush. I'm spraying on a fairly heavy coat, so there's going to be plenty of material to work with. You're going to want to go end to end with the grain of the wood. And since this door is paneled, there's those cracks in between each panel. You're going to want to check those, make sure there's no drips coming out. We eventually will raise these doors up so that they can dry flat and out of the elements for a little bit. But you just kind of want to check them and make sure that you're not going to have any drips for about 10 minutes. We're also painting the trim around this garage door. We raised the garage doors up. We're going to get the trim scrape sanded, peel bond primed, and top coated with paint. Hopefully we can leave these garage doors up for a few hours. It's better if the homeowner's home to let them know, just so it can stay out of the elements for a few hours. The crew came back the following day to get those sashes installed. They just used some double-sided sticky tape again on the sash to get those stuck to the window. So you can see that with a wood garage door after 2 coats application, you're going to have some variations, some darker areas, some lighter areas. Now, if we were to apply a 3rd coat or 4th coat, it's going to start to minimize that. You're going to get a little bit more uniformity, but a lot of people can appreciate how it has more of that natural wood look. It's just something that you'll want to talk to the homeowner about after that 2nd coat to make sure that they like it, because we can apply multiple coats for an additional charge, and it's really not that much extra work. So that concludes the garage door refinishing video. If you have any questions, let me know.